Before I turn this program over to Roger Gros of Global Gaming Business, I've been given the honor of introducing today's speaker. How does one introduce someone who needs no introduction? How do you introduce someone who has changed the lives of thousands of people, including my own? For nearly the last 6 years, I have helped execute Sheldon's visions by listening to his suggestions, corrections, and ideas, learning from his experience, while at the same time witnessing his brilliance. But today, I hope that all of you here will get a taste not only of some of that, but also a much better understanding of who Sheldon Adelson really is. Not just brains and ideas for business, but what he thinks about the world, his friends, his family, and his values. There are no tough questions you can ask Sheldon to answer. There is never a dodge of the bullet, never a doubt to an answer. He is always direct and absolutely confident in every answer. When you get to know him better, you will put your misconceptions, if there are any, and prejudicial pictures in the wastebasket. For you will see he is a patriot, a father, a grandfather, and most of all, a loyal friend. Sheldon Adelson is more than just a successful businessman. You will know that after you hear him today. Please listen. It will make your afternoon worthwhile. Ladies and gentlemen, my boss and my friend, Sheldon Adelson.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for giving us this time today, Mr. Adelson. It's very nice to be able to do this, and I'm honored to be able to have chosen to be speaking with you today.
You could just call me Hey You.
Can
I first acknowledge that there are a couple of important people
absolutely,
here?
Please.
There's Andrea and Steve Wynn.
Absolutely.
That we've become very close friends. And most important, I've become very close friends with another person, my wife. We've been very good friends for 26 years now. And hopefully I expect another 26 years.
Absolutely, we hope so too.
If she takes me off probation. I noticed yesterday that Steve talked about he shut off his iPhone 6.
Yes.
Now, I can barely operate my Samsung 4. and prior to that, I couldn't operate whatever I had before. But I did console myself. I bought a new 4-engine, 22-hour range, A340-500.
Nope, very nice.
So I consoled myself, and maybe I don't have it, but it's used. It's not really new. But I did console myself with it.
Thank you. Well, I was honored to be at the interview you did with Artie Nathan at UNLV a few weeks ago, or actually a few months ago in the spring.
A few years ago.
And you told the story of your life, basically, the rags to riches story, selling newspapers on the corner, developing your many successful businesses, and finally the development of Comdex and your entry into the gaming industry. And I think we all know that story here in this room. We've all been admirers of yours for many years.
Well, tell me about it.
So I'd really like to start with the gaming part of your resume with our audience today. So if you could just start with telling us what inspired you to get into the gaming industry and the purchase of the Sands.
Say that again?
If you can tell us what inspired you to get into the gaming industry with your purchase of the Sands in 1988 and the subsequent construction of this facility.
Okay. Actually, at that time I was in the trade show business.
Right.
And I had a vision for creating a show I called Comdex, which was an acronym for Computer Dealers Expo. And it grew exponentially, so fast. It quadrupled from the first year to the second year. Because the market for third-party distribution channel was exploding. And I sensed it was happening. And so I needed to find a piece of land because I knew the convention authorities typically, not just Nevada or Las Vegas, but typically they work very slow, the municipal authorities. So I decided that I would go and buy a piece of land and build my own exhibition center. So that's what I did. I looked for a property. I had to get an adjacent facility on which I could build meeting rooms like what we're in.
Sure.
So right now we're in a box of meeting rooms that up to here is about 10, and we build 330 meeting rooms.
Okay.
So I needed a hotel that had enough land to build a 1 million square foot convention center, which at that time turned out to be the largest convention center in the country. Mm-hmm. It was the first and only privately owned built. So I got into the business. So I had to buy the property. I had to get a gaming license, right. Mm-hmm. and everything that went along with it.
So it was more about...
Which is what I did. It was more about getting the land for the convention center.
It was more about the convention business than gaming at that point.
At that point.
Okay. And of course...
Well, I've sort of reversed myself since then.
Right. Of course, that was the first time the doubters came out of the closet. They said, "Oh,
the what?
The people who doubted you, who have continued
No, that's not
to doubt
the first time.
Well,
it's happened.
I'm talking about.
It's happened to me dozens of times in my life.
In gaming, let's leave it at that.
In anything,
okay.
in everything.
But
that's why my wife still has me on probation.
They doubted whether this would work here. They doubted whether your entry into Asia would work, and they've doubted almost every step you've taken along the way. Why do you believe that the people who doubt you were wrong, and how did you prove them wrong?
Why were they wrong? Because they guessed against me.
Right.
That should be clear. I'll have to go back a little bit in my lifetime. I've been in business for 69 years, since I was 12. And every time, well, after the first dozen or so businesses, I realized that the only way to get ahead was to do things differently than the way it was being done. And then I came to learn, which I finally learned at my ripe young age, that if you do things differently, success will follow you like your shadow. And you can't get rid of it. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. So people doubted me because people just didn't do what I would do. It's a matter of finding out what it is that an industry does and identifying the opportunity as to how to do it differently, and then being enough of a risk taker to actually do it differently. Mm-hmm. So people doubted me because nobody thought of doing it the way that I did, and they were satisfied with the status quo, and I'm never satisfied with the status quo.
Well, let's talk about Asia. One of the things that happened in the beginning where the concessionaires were chosen, they all had some plans, but you had plans for a region in Macau called Cotai, which was just a marshland at that point. What did you see there that has now come into fruition today, where there's all these great facilities that are up and being constructed right now?
Well, if you looked at Las Vegas, and you had a couple of big helicopters with big slings, and you put it under the strip, and you picked up the entire strip with all of the properties abutting it, and bring it over to Asia, could you succeed? Mm-hmm. And the answer to me was yes. I mean, Steve and Caesars had made a career out of bringing in Asians, mm-hmm. and they did very well at it. So it was clear that the Asian people loved to, as I call it, challenge luck. Mm-hmm. And so it was clear to me that if I just picked up Vegas, but I looked around, I couldn't find any big helicopters big enough to pick up the strip, so I decided that I'll just reproduce the strip the way it was built here over there. And that's what it's all about. when the government first gave me the piece of land, Macau is comprised of a peninsula, which is part of the mainland, and two very small islands, a very short distance away. The peninsula connected to one, and the one had only a causeway connected to the second. And the rest of the land was all water. It was a bay and a swamp. And I thought it was ideal. It was flat. There were no hills. So I could reproduce what I saw as the Strip. Flat, no hills. And all I had to do is, when the government sent me out there, I asked them, they said, well, this is going to be your permanent site, after they gave me what turned out to be the Sands Macau site. So I went out there and I looked at it and I said, and I couldn't find the land.
Right.
So I went back to the government and I said, I thought for sure I was being exiled. For sure. They didn't want a guy to come out there, and so I couldn't get in the middle of the peninsula where all the casinos were. There were only a couple. There were none in the second island. The first one in, there were two or three small ones in the first island.
Right.
So I went back to the government and I said, well, you sent me out to what was called COTAI, an acronym of Coleraine and Taipa. And I said, I didn't find the land. I said, where's the land? They said, it's under the water. I said, what am I supposed to do? Take a pump and pump the water out or what? And they said, no, you bring in sand, you bring in barges of sand and you fill it in. I said, okay, I guess we can do that. My vision was to create Asia's Las Vegas, make a strip. Now, it wasn't long enough. It was only from one island to the other. It was only 2.5 kilometers. And we couldn't measure in miles because their cars were in kilometers. They were metric cars. So I measured it by driving it. So what I met with an architectural land planning firm, and I laid out what turned out to be, because it wasn't long enough to equal this strip, 20 lots. On this strip, there's about 25 mega resorts. 20 would be enough. And so I laid it out, I gave it to the government. They thought it was great. Of course, everybody thought I would fail. I got into a pissing match with Stanley Ho about, he thought I was going to fail, I thought he was going to fail, that we were going to put the peninsula out of business. It was going to be like downtown Las Vegas compared to the Strip. Blah, blah, blah. We went back and forth. And I told him, I said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. So he put on an apron and he cooked pork and rice. And he gave out pork and rice to all his customers. It was a pretty funny scene. So I started to build. One of our competitors, the guy with whom we were originally supposed to share a license, Galaxy, the guy came up to me and he said, I ran into him one day while we were still talking. He doesn't want to talk to me anymore. And I said, well, when are you going to start? Because it's a whole long story, but we each got the same amount of land. There was 115 acres that we each got. And I picked the land on the Strip, and he picked the land in back of the Strip, to the west of the Strip. And I said, when are you going to start? I don't see any construction going on. We opened in 07. It must have been 06, I said to him. He said, oh, I'm not going to do that. He said, first of all, I don't think you're going to succeed. But I'm going to wait till you take the risk and see whether or not you do succeed. If by some chance you do, by some luck, you succeed, then I'm going to build. But if you don't succeed, I'm not going to build. I said, okay. So he lost 3 years, 4 years. and then he opened, that was Galaxy.
I remember the first time we came to the opening of the hotel there, the Venetian, and his building was halfway up, and he had stopped construction. So he was still waiting then at that point for you to succeed.
Even after he started.
Right.
After we opened and he started, he kept on stopping.
Right.
I'd say all in all, he lost probably about 4 or 5 years.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk about Macau today. We've run into a bump in the road revenue-wise. A lot of problems in the VIP junket area. What's happening? A lot of people have different views of that. From your viewpoint, what's happening there now?
Well, my view is that everything that I've seen happen in the last 13 years, when I first was exposed to Macau, is cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
It comes and it goes. It's like gambling. You start off at a baseline. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. Because sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. It's cyclical. Everything that happened there, for instance, when they limited the number of times somebody, a Chinese citizen, could go to Macau, first they said you can only go once a month, and once every 2 months, then once every 3 months, but they never announced it. And they never announced that it was over.
Right.
This time, quite surprising to me, they announced within the last couple of days that they said that they've achieved their goals in this corruption crackdown, and they're gonna let up on it.
Okay.
Surprised the heck out of me.
So you think we're at the end of this difficult period then?
I think the players that want to stay below the radar, that don't want to show up there, whether they're corrupt or not, they just don't want to. You know, there's a lot of money involved, and they don't want to send a message to the government that they may be corrupt.
Okay.
They don't want to be seen.
Okay, great.
So I think it'll take a couple of more months before people feel a little more comfortable, and they'll come and play more.
And people are still ignoring, however, that the mass market is growing very strongly in Macau.
Well, what irritates me a little bit is how people look only at the short term. When my friend Steve once said, I don't want to be judged on a quarter-to-quarter basis. Right. I mean, this is a long-term investment. And you can't judge. They're getting down to, they're talking about win in MOP per day for the last week. Pretty soon they're going to talk about MOP win or loss per hour.
Right.
Then they'll have a reader board up and it'll show how much is win or loss per minute. So this is all ridiculous. You know, you're in business for
the long term.
For the long term.
Right.
We've spent 9 or 10 or 11 billion dollars, but who's counting? And in Macau, and we're under construction with another property, and I've asked for permission to do yet another one, non-gaming, without tables. I think that I didn't invest that kind of money just so that I could have the next week or 2 weeks. I invested that money over the long term. I don't think that the cultural practices, the cultural mores of Asian people is going to change. It's been happening for thousands of years, and I don't think it's going to change. And if the shortfall right now is cyclical, it'll come right back.
Okay.
I can't imagine, even if they didn't make the recent announcement, that it would last another 6 or 8 months.
Okay, great. Let's talk about Singapore.
The market is growing. The Chinese government has spent tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, U.S. equivalent, to build transportation infrastructure. They're coming through with high-speed trains that are bringing, we've gone to the outer reaches of Guangdong province, to the nearer reaches of the adjacent province, and now we're penetrating those provinces with this very high-speed, very costly transportation infrastructure. Now, when the bridge gets finished in less than 24 months, the Hong Kong Macau-Zhuhai Bridge, Macau, interestingly, will have another ready-made airport, which will be almost as fast to get in and out of Macau as it is with the Macau airport. So if you get out of the Hong Kong airport and you turn one way, 20 minutes you're in Macau. If you turn the other way, it's 45 minutes to drive downtown, usually through a little bit of traffic at least, to get to Hong Kong Island. So you got to ask yourself, do I want to go to Hong Kong Island, or can I just go to Macau and go to my convention, or go and have a good time with leisure tourism and gaming thrown in? So we are going to have another airport that services 100 commercial airlines, servicing 180 cities. We're servicing 50 some odd million people in and out for a year. So with that and that additional infrastructure, that air transportation, the ground transportation, the government is, the PRC is spending hundreds of billions of dollars on, just going to reach further and further into the eastern part of China. And as we do, these people will come, knowing they can't come every Monday and Thursday. They'll come once in 3 months or 6 months or maybe once a year, but they're going to bring a much higher gaming budget with them. So this will feed into the premium mass and into the VIP market.
And of course, the fact analysts still ignore is that we penetrated, Macau has penetrated only about 1% of the Chinese market so far.
I think the figure's 2 or a little over
okay,
2. But that's if you consider that all of the visitation comes only once a year.
Right.
Now, we know that's not true.
Right, no question. Well, let's talk about Singapore. They call it an integrated resort there. You were one of the bidders. You won out. And the property you put out there...
I got lucky.
The property you put up there is simply spectacular. It's one of the most iconic buildings in the world. I remember being in Mike Levin's office the day they were raising the platform to the top, and he was a little bit nervous that day, but
I was there.
Yeah, that's right.
I was going to sit on it, you know, like in the movie, the guy that sat on the bomb, and he rode the bomb all the way. I was going to ride the bridge, the span all the way up to the top.
Or maybe when Steve sat on top of his building in the beginning, right?
I was thinking about that the other day. I had to say, he must have had a hell of a nerve to do that.
So why did you build something so iconic?
It's a good thing his wife liked him. She could have either cut the rope or gave him a push.
Why did you build something so iconic? Why didn't you just recreate a Venetian in Singapore?
Well, the competition had sort of an architectural component to it. They said that like 20 or 30% of the decision was going to be made on the architecture. But we had an architect, Moshe Safdie, that is brilliant and does things somewhat iconic. And when he came up with that, actually the bridge on the top level, the Sky Park, wasn't in his original idea.
Really?
No. But after we finished the design and I had to give final approval to it, I told him he didn't have a swimming pool. He said, well, tell you the truth, you don't really need a swimming pool. He said, besides, I don't have any place to put it. We used up all the land. I said, put it on the roof. Of course, there are hotels with swimming pools on the roof. He said, oh, that's a good idea. Now, I didn't ask him to build the whole Sky Park. He said, but if you got 3 buildings, I said, well, maybe you can, if you take the top floor and we send elevators up the outside 2 buildings, put the pool in the middle, and they could walk over a pedestrian walkway between the buildings. I didn't think he's going to build what he did. So he did that, and it turned out to be the best.
Okay.
And I do believe in iconic buildings, that when we're competing with other people that have very good buildings, I saw the design in some publication of MGM's proposal for Osaka, a beautiful design. Could it be considered iconic? To me, iconic is like the Opera House in Sydney, Australia, where if you looked at the picture, you know exactly the city in which it's located. That's an iconic building. So all of our presentations for future locations and emerging markets will be iconic buildings. It's kind of like when architects, young architects come out of school and they get a job at the architectural firm, and they, in their interview, or once they're accepted, the architect, the boy or girl, will take a design out of their back pocket or out of the girl's pocketbook and say, hey boss, you know, I've been dreaming about this while I've been in architecture school. I want to show you the building that is going to be the greatest building that we could ever do here. And then he shows it to the boss. Boss looks around for the round file cabinet. And he takes it and he throws it over into the round cabinet. And he says, well, nobody's going to buy that. So, I mean, that's a beautiful building, but it's iconic. It's iconic. Only universities and museums can afford to build an iconic building. And only somebody as crazy and as risk-taking as Sheldon Adelson would build an iconic building for the billions of dollars it'll cost, because it wins the day. So it's one thing to compete with all the other hotels here on the Strip, and it's another thing to have an individual iconic building and offer this to an emerging market. And when I'm looking at the mayors and the governors and whoever I'm talking to in the government, I sort of hint, I said, you know, your grandchildren will say to their cohorts in school, my daddy was the mayor and he's responsible for building that building. That's what your grandchildren will say.
Okay.
They haven't said that yet, but I expect them to.
Let's talk about this country for a few minutes. On the Las Vegas Strip, a large majority of its revenues now comes from the non-gaming amenities. Do you believe this is something that casino destinations all across the country should strive for now, particularly in view of the increasing competition in all the jurisdictions in the U.S.?
We should what?
Should
I was thinking about the answer before you finished the question. And I missed the question.
Should the casinos in the United States concentrate more on creating non-gaming amenities to attract non-gaming customers?
Yes.
And what amenities do you think
it's clear. You've got to scale it down. We did this in Bethlehem.
Right.
We took an integrated resort business model and we scaled it down. Mm-hmm. It's scalable, but only to a certain extent. Because these meeting rooms, if we're going to be a MICE-based marketing strategy, we've got to have so many square foot of meeting room to so many for each sleeping room.
Right.
So you got to build. You just can't say, well, I'm going to be in what's called in Asia MICE, meetings, incentives, conventions, and exhibitions. You can't say, well, I'm building a property that's going to specialize in MICE and build 10 meeting rooms. You know, I'm making a proposal for, and I'm building 500 meeting rooms. When I came up with my idea that I couldn't finally get the Spanish government to agree to, I got one of the three governments in Spain to agree to it. But then the EU wouldn't have done it. I was going to build 2,400 meeting rooms. That would have been the convention capital of the world. But wherever we build, anywhere else, just I believe in the MICE business.
Right. But there has to be a gaming component to support that,
That's
building
right.
that large.
You lose money operating places like this. You can't pay back the money just running exhibition convention centers, like you know, charging a little more in a hotel room. You got to have something to subsidize it. There are various parts of an integrated resort that will lose money, like the museums, like the arenas, like the exhibition centers, like the Congress Center. We call this, that's a European term, Congress Center. Meetings and ballrooms. You can't make money on that, but you need a subsidy to put up enough critical mass to make it to make it what you're trying to make it, MICE focused, or whatever you want to do, entertainment focused.
Okay. You declined to bid on a license in Massachusetts, and which some people found a little strange because you're a native of Massachusetts.
I still have a home there.
Exactly. Do you still think that was the right decision now, especially since it's taken so long to get the process underway, and we're still quite a ways before the first casino will open?
Well, I didn't think I could scale down. My business model of an IR, an integrated resort, works best in the middle of a city or on the edge of a city, because we need the other tourism infrastructure to support it. We need restaurants, we need other hotels, we need local transportation, we need national or international airports. There was no downtown location available in Boston at which my MICE-based business model could work. And besides, I saw the possibility of New Hampshire opening up a couple more, Connecticut having a couple, Rhode Island having a couple, Maine having some, 2 or 3, and New York was just, Massachusetts, only 125 miles wide. And I just saw that there was too much. So in order for my business model to work, I had to be downtown. There was no land available downtown to do this. And I thought that if there are already going to be as many as 10 or 12 casinos within 100 miles, my friend Steve does a better job at creating a mystique about establishing a new property. He does a better job than I do. We each have our own specialties. He's got a better specialty of getting the mystique about the property better than I do. I'd take a different approach. So he could do it better than we can. I'd have to scale down my MICE-based business model, and I wouldn't have condos to sell in order to get back the money that we're spending on our core assets. So for those combination of reasons, and the fact that we're looking for other larger in-city emerging markets, that we decided against going there. Okay. But there's 10 or 12 competitors. So the market, Steve will do much better than all the other properties, because they're just putting up plain casinos.
Right.
He'll put up more amenities, more of an integrated resort, and he'll do a comprehensive and a good job. What he needs to make money, and what the community wants, for the sole purpose of, to accomplish the reason and the raison d'etre for establishing, quote, casinos in the first place, he'll accomplish. The other guys won't accomplish.
Okay. Another market you declined to enter was Atlantic City. Even when you got into the business in 1988, that was the only other gambling market in the country. Why did you not see any opportunities there then or now? Because
when I was a kid, my uncle had a wheel at the $1 Million Pier, and I worked in Atlantic City. And I used to vacation there when I was stationed in New York City in the Army, in which I was located for 2 years. And I just got a feeling that everybody has to come to Atlantic City. There is no existing local market there. Even Steve got out of it many years ago after he just got in it. It was my conviction that one day the abutting states are going to legalize gaming, and it will suck out all the business that Atlantic City is siphoning from the adjacent states.
Okay, which has just proven itself out.
It's proven itself out.
Now, yesterday in northern New Jersey at the Meadowlands racetrack, they had a conference, and they were talking about building a facility in the Meadowlands. A lot of people brought your name up at the time, thinking that you're the only one that can come into the Meadowlands and build something spectacular enough that it would draw people from New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and the whole tri-state region.
They did.
They did.
Oh,
Would you be interested in that?
yes.
Yes. And you.
Do I have to explain that?
Well, can you? So it's proximity to New York with all the transportation options from New York City, from the northern New Jersey market is attractive to you and your company then.
Yeah, because Secaucus doesn't have the pig farms that used to.
That's
that
right.
used to rain the odor of the pig farms on Meadowlands. And when I was stationed at Governor's Island in New York City, I could smell Secaucus on Governor's Island. So we don't have that anymore. So
Right.
it would be a very attractive place to do.
Okay.
But it all depends what the government of New Jersey wants. Look, it's a two-edged sword. You could go in there and spend a lot of money, billions, and then you could wake up one day and then Governor Cuomo, whoever is governor or mayor of New York City, will say, look, they're taking all the New Yorkers' money and they're sucking it up in that casino in Meadowlands. We could open New York and keep the money in New York. Mm-hmm. So all the people that you're getting, you'll still have northern New Jersey and on the other side of the river. It's not a geographical distance, an equidistant from one casino to another. It's a matter of travel time. So even though it may be 3 miles away, it could take you an hour to get there. And you can get there faster from 30 miles away and be there in 30 minutes, 35 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of travel time, not the distance. Could it for at least 5 or 6 years provide a return on capital? Yes, and a good one.
Okay. Now,
so we would be interested in that.
Would you be interested only if it was a monopoly for your organization, or if there was a proposal for another one, say as there is in Jersey City? Would that be something that would make you think twice?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I haven't thought about that. Nobody's brought that up to me before, but I don't think I would have to think twice about it. If they put several, then I think twice about it.
Okay.
But if they put one other, I don't think so.
Okay. So do you think that the U.S. gaming market